political parties, how awful they are, and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams too. And what troubles me the most is we're now a country that doesn't seem to want to read history. And of course, the old cliche is true: if you don't read history, you're destined to repeat it. And we're heading right down that road because people are more interested in these phony reality shows on TV. They're more interested in sports happening throughout the world. Which, don't get me wrong, that's great entertainment, and you need to entertain yourself. We all work hard, and you owe yourself some entertainment, but you also owe yourself to pay attention. And pay attention to what's going on around you. And what bothers me most is most people have this laissez-faire attitude. Well, it isn't going to happen to me. And until it does come up and happen to them, they're not taking any precautions. They're not paying attention to government. And people are not voting. And right now, voting against Democrats and Republicans, to me, has to be the number one order for this fall. I can't emphasize it enough. Stop voting for these two bought-out, bribed political parties. In fact, they used to always say, if you voted for me, Jesse Ventura in Minnesota, you were wasting your vote because I couldn't win. Well, I did win. And we also ought to demand that Governor Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate for president, be included in the debates this fall. Why do we only get two leaders of the two gangs who get the debate? Let's bring in a neutral person like Governor Johnson and see what he has to say. And then if you still want to vote Democrat and Republican, well, at least you've been given a third option to consider.
Well, you're right. And even if you don't agree with Johnson on every issue, the point is it's about forcing the two-party monopoly, the two twins, to let in another voice, which is something they desperately don't want. Because
Alex, let me add something. No one's ever going to agree with the candidate 100%. You're never going to see a candidate for public office where you can honestly say, I agree with everything he says. Take Ron Paul and I. I think Ron Paul would have been the best president without any doubt. And yet we differ on the abortion issue. Ron Paul does not support abortion at all. I do. I don't necessarily support people having abortion, but I don't support government telling women what they can or can't do with their bodies.
Yeah, well, Ron Paul comes out and basically says it's become a state issue, and people are attacking Rand Paul right now because he's saying, hey, don't have mandatory federal labeling for GMO, but he's saying the feds don't have that jurisdiction. It should be a state issue, and that's a complex issue, but I understand why he's saying that.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, I just got a communication from Rand Paul, and let me tell you this, Alex. I don't know if you're aware of this one. You probably are, because you're usually more aware than I am. But I got a thing from Rand Paul. Are you aware of this treaty in the UN that they're going to try to get us to sign on to?
Which one? They've got an anti...
Well, it's going to happen this fall, and it's one that will have international gun registration.
Oh, yeah, sure. No, there's the treaty that Hillary says they're going to sign without Congress and register and restrict small arms, the Unidentification Treaty, yeah. And then there's also the Law of the Sea Treaty that hands over everything to the UN. Yeah, speak to that, Governor. Where do you stand on UN law restricting our guns?
Well, that's absurd. I mean, we have the Second Amendment, which is to protect our right as individuals to have firearms. It's not there. People need to understand. They try to sell you, well, we're not going to inflict on your hunting and fishing. This has nothing to do with hunting and fishing. Back when they wrote the Bill of Rights, if you didn't hunt and fish, you didn't eat. So this was done so that the public could arm themselves in case government became oppressive. Well, what's going to happen with this deal is we will now throw our Second Amendment out the window. We will then fall under an international arms law that will require you to register all your guns internationally with some international unit who eventually, is going to disarm you. And, that's the liberal side of the issue. That's their thing. That's like Bill Maher on TV is for that. And I go, well, how ridiculous is that? Because I was in the Philippines the day Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law and became a dictator. The first thing he did as a dictator, he gave the Philippine people 2 weeks to turn in all their guns or it was the death sentence. Now, why would a dictator make that his top priority? It's obvious why. So the public has no way to rise up against him.
That's right, Governor, and I'm very glad that you're here speaking about it. Here's our article, June 16th, Infowars.com. Obama seeks UN and U.S. congressional ratification of UN Global Gun Control Treaty. And then it has links to the UN in our article where they're actually calling for it at the United Nations. UN.org, disarmament /COV arms /arms trade treaty. Registration, restriction, and in the UN treaty, they state civilian ownership of firearms threatens the legitimate power monopoly of the state. So they're admitting they want a power monopoly. What you just said, I say that's illegitimate. And I tell you, if they want to cause a civil war, Governor, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, look at it this way, Alex. I'll give you the best example. I live in Mexico 5 months out of the year. In Mexico, private ownership of guns is illegal. And look what's going on down there. 20 to 30,000 people a year are killed by the drug cartels because the regular people down there have no mechanism to defend themselves. And so all these guns advocates that want to disarm us, take a look at the country of Mexico. As I said, they have big signs when you drive into Mexico. Firearms and even ammunition are illegal. If you're caught with them, you will go immediately to Mexican prison. And look at the end results. It's the old cliche. When the honest people don't have guns, only the bad people do, because they're not getting theirs legally anyway. So they're going to have guns. They don't care one way or the other, the criminals. And that's exactly what would happen up here. The only people then that would have firearms would be criminals.
I'm on the UN treaty website where they say they want the abolition of all of our guns. And it says strengthening peace and security through disarmament, but then only the UN, who, by the way, is invading countless countries as we speak, has the guns. Imagine what Hitler would have done if the rest of the world had been disarmed.
Yeah. Well, you know, a little bit. I mean, we still had our militaries, naturally, that fought him. You know, it wasn't the civilian people necessarily.
But now it's a global government. Now it's a global government.
Yeah, but you're talking about a global government here. How then do we rise up if we don't like the global government? You know, I guess, you know, we can get a bunch of slingshots or something and stand up to them.
Governor Jesse Ventura is with us. His book is already going up the bestseller charts, Democrats and Republicans. Get it out to everybody out there that you know who's not awake to what's happening. A lot of Founding Father quotes, a lot of great insight available at InfoWarsShop.com and bookstores everywhere. But speaking of global government, since we just raised that point, you were on the Kudlow report last week, and I'm not going to play the whole clip because we don't have time. I want to go to calls, but they savaged you for daring to say there's some holes in the official 9/11 story, to say the least. But let's stop there. Here's the same report. I thought there was no global government. I thought the big banks, like in your TV show last year, where you expose, run the global government. I thought that was all made up, Governor. Here is CNBC talking about the global government 2 days ago.
So mostly what they do is hold summits.
I think that right now the question is, do we all work for central bankers? That's what I want to address to our guest tonight. Is this global governance at last? Is it one world, the central bankers in charge? Jim Urio, you say we've got some downside here, a correction in the markets. Fine. But aren't we all just living and dying for what the central banks do? Aren't we all just counting on the fact that there's a Bernanke put and that we won't go any lower than, say, 5% down from here?
Of course we are, because if we look at the economic data, there's nothing to get excited about in that. So yesterday we saw some reluctance for the Bernanke Fed to expand their balance sheets and pump more money in. But the stock market knows that reluctance is totally different than not willing to do it at all. And that's why we saw oil implode and gold trade off heavily, because they're not a protected class. If the stock market starts trading off in the 10 to 15 to 20% area, the chairman's going to come in and throw some stimulus at it. So to answer your question, we are absolutely slaves to central banks, because we'd love to be slaves of the economy, but the economic numbers continue to do nothing but trend low.
All right, let's stop there. They go on to basically thank the Federal Reserve. The full clip's at Infowars.com. They go on to basically thank the Federal Reserve and say, well, they're just trying to fix things. We'd like a market, but everything's run by them. They're the main recipients of the trillions in bailout. They sold the derivatives. In Europe, 90+% of the debt is theirs, but the media acts like it's the public as they raise taxes, cut benefits, further stalling the economy. Governor, there were literally in the last few weeks more than 30 articles in mainstream news admitting an authoritarian world government's here run by banks, but they know best and thank God they're there. Why do you think they're coming out in the open now?
Well, because eventually the truth will come out, Alex. You know, you can't keep things hidden forever, so they want to get ahead of the 8 ball. They want to put the spin on it so that all the lemmings in the country will be comfortable with it when it actually does come a clear-cut reality out there. That's why they're doing it. It's very intelligent to do it that way. If it's going to happen, they want to be ahead of the curve on it so that they can put their spin on it first, and that way anyone else that opposes it will be fighting an uphill battle.
Exactly, because people only remember the first time they heard it reported and how it was reported. They don't remember later, like the official story of 9/11. We're told this is the official story, that's it, go back to sleep. But when you actually look closer, it's got more holes in it than Swiss cheese. On the same show, they tried to imply that you were bad and that you were saying, you know, like the Americans did it instead of the globalists. What's your take on that?
Well, again, you know, anyone that questions 9/11 in this country to mainstream media is considered a nutcase. How dare you do it? You're unpatriotic. And, you know, they offer us no information. They accept the 9/11 report that had to be, I learned this, everything in the 9/11 report had to be agreed upon unanimously or it didn't get in the report, you know, and everything of that nature. So it doesn't surprise me a bit, Alex.
Well, the fact is, the system is scared of free thinkers, people that'll tell it like it is. Yourself, myself, Ron Paul, and so many others. But as you've pointed out earlier, the answer is everybody speaking out. Everybody not going along with the cookie-cutter, mainline system.
Well, again, I'll tell you what, you and I talked about organizing a boycott to the airports for one day. I'd like to change that now, and I think we need to organize and we need to protest the fact that the upcoming election will only be between two hand-picked people by the gangs. We need to get Gary Johnson in the debates, and I think if we're going to stand up and be counted, there is the spot to do it because it's right on the horizon. Why should we only get the two voices of the two bribed-out parties where you're going to get business as usual when you've got a brilliant man like Gary Johnson waiting in the wings who would make an outstanding president
and
of this country?
By the way, I saw clips on the news, too. We've got the clip in there. Was it CNN or MSNBC where they were criticizing you? You were on the show, and they're like, we don't like the fact that you're criticizing, calling them gangs. Do you remember that interview?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They came after me real hard. In fact, the guy tried to lecture me that I need to go out and talk to people to learn what a real gang is, the Crips and the Bloods. And I find that laughable considering I used to be a full-patch member of the Mongols Motorcycle Club, the Black